In the beginning. Think of a big, beautiful, empty land with mountains, forests, lakes, animals, and fish, but no people. This was America 16,000 years ago. Around that time, the first people probably arrived in Alaska from Asia. They traveled south and became the Native Americans of North America and the Maya, Aztecs, Inca, and other peoples of Central and South America. The Inuit, Eskimos, came to Canada and the Arctic the same way. But there are only a few of these peoples in America today. In the 16th century, Europeans started to come to America, and soon after that, they brought slaves from Africa to work for them. Large numbers of immigrants continued to arrive from all over the world until the middle of the 20th century. The empty land was now full of people, speaking different languages and with different ideas. There are just 3 countries now in North America: Canada, Mexico, and the USA. But there were nearly several more. And the 300 million people who live in the 50 states of the United States are not all the same. About 67% are white, 13% Hispanic, Spanish-speaking, 13% black, 4% Asian, and just 1% Native American. Most of them speak English, but it is not the same English as people speak in Britain, and many Americans speak Spanish as their first language. So, how was the USA born? How did it grow? What kind of country is it now? This book will try to answer those questions and many more. 2. The Pilgrim Fathers. The name America comes from an Italian businessman called Amerigo Vespucci, who sailed to South America between 1499 and 1502. But he was not the first European to make the dangerous journey across the Atlantic. The Vikings came to Vinland, probably Canada or New England, from Scandinavia around AD 1000. But they did not stay. Then, in 1492, a brave Italian sailor called Christopher Columbus reached the Caribbean while he was looking for a sea route from Europe to India. Columbus called the Native Americans Indians because he thought that he had reached India. When Columbus returned to Europe, he told people about his adventures, and other sailors, like Cabot and Cartier, followed him across the Atlantic. Europeans came to fish the rich seas of America, too. But it was only in the 17th century that the French, the Dutch, and the British all came to live in North America. The French in Quebec, the Dutch in New York, and the British in Virginia and New England. 2 very different groups of English people crossed the Atlantic. The first group began the colony of Jamestown in Virginia in 1607. They hoped to find gold there, but life was very hard for them. There was very little food, and many of them died during the first winter. Then Pocahontas, the daughter of a Native American chief, became a friend of Captain John Smith and helped him and the other English people. She later married a man called John Rolfe and went to England with him. Luckily, tobacco saved the young colony. It was easy to grow tobacco in Virginia, and smoking was becoming very fashionable. People in the colony stopped looking for gold and began to grow tobacco, which they sold in Europe. Soon, they started to bring people from Africa to work as their slaves and help them to grow more and more. John Smith traveled north in 1614 to the part of America that he called New England. When he returned to London, he told people that it was a good place to live. In 1620, another group of 101 English men, women, and children arrived in Plymouth, Massachusetts. These people are called the Pilgrims, or Pilgrim Fathers, and they had very strong ideas about religion. They did not want to live in England because they did not agree with the English Church. So they sailed to America in a ship called the Mayflower. They farmed the land, and they bought and sold animal skins. They thought that all people were equal, and so they did not have slaves. The Pilgrims, too, were often ill and hungry, and nearly half of them died in the first year. But they had help from some of the Native Americans, particularly a man called Squanto. He went to Europe as a prisoner in 1605 and spent some years in England, so he spoke some English. He showed the Pilgrims how to hunt and grow corn. In the autumn of 1621, the Pilgrims had a big dinner to give thanks for the first food that they had grown themselves. This day was called Thanksgiving, and Americans still celebrate it every year on the fourth Thursday of November. It is one of the most important holidays in the year, and people often travel many hundreds of kilometers to be with their families. They eat a big dinner with two of the foods that the Pilgrim Fathers found in America: turkey and pie filled with pumpkin. 3. The War of Independence. More and more British people came to live on the east coast of North America in the 17th century, starting colonies in Maryland, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, North and South Carolina, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Georgia followed in the 18th century, when the British also took New York and Delaware from the Dutch. By 1770, there were 13 colonies along the east coast of North America, and they were all governed by Britain. But Britain was a long way away, and the people of the colonies became angry at the high taxes that the government made them pay. In December 1773, a group of men threw 342 boxes of tea into the sea at Boston because they did not want to pay the British tax on it. This was the Boston Tea Party. The British government was now angry too, and in April 1775, some Americans fought a group of British soldiers at the towns of Lexington and Concord, near Boston in Massachusetts. More and more Americans arrived until the British soldiers had to move back to Boston. A few months later, after the Battle of Bunker Hill near Boston, it was clear that Britain was at war with its American colonies. A rich farmer from Virginia, George Washington became the chief of the American Army. People tell a story about Washington to show that he was an honest man. They say that when he was a boy, he cut down a tree, and this made his father angry. But when his father asked him about it, he told him, "I cannot tell a lie. I cut down the tree." The colonies did not say that they wanted to be fully independent until the summer of 1776. A man called Thomas Jefferson wrote the famous Declaration of Independence, where he said that the king, George III, was not a good king because he had not let his people have their rights. The right to life, to freedom, and to happiness. The day of the Declaration of Independence, the 4th of July, is another important American holiday. The Americans finally won the war in October 1781, and 2 years after that, they were free to govern themselves. In 1789, they made George Washington their first president. Although he wanted to go back to his farm at Mount Vernon and enjoy a quiet life, he stayed president until 1797. He died in 1799, just 2 years after he returned home. The names United States of America and American were first used at the time of the War of Independence. The 13 colonies became the first 13 states of the United States. In 1803, after Jefferson became the 3rd president, he bought a large area of land in the Midwest from France. It was 5 times as big as France, and it only cost $15 million. Jefferson then sent 2 brave men, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, to travel across America all the way to the Pacific. With a young Native American woman called Sacagawea to help them, the 2 men traveled 13,000 kilometers between 1804 and 1806. They found many animals, plants, and fish that were new to Europeans, and they made maps of the rivers, mountains, and land that they crossed. In 1819, the USA bought Florida from Spain. The United States was now twice as big as it had been in 1781. And by 1848, after it won Texas and the Southwest from Mexico, it had grown again. It now reached all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific, over 5,000 kilometers. Finally, the American government bought the land northwest of Canada from Russia in 1867 for $7.2 million, and it became the state of Alaska in 1959. The American flag, known as the Stars and Stripes, first appeared at the time of the War of Independence. It has a stripe for each of the first 13 states, and a star was added every time a new state joined. So there are now 50 stars. The last star was added when the beautiful islands of Hawaii in the Pacific, 4,000 kilometers west of California, became the 50th state of the USA in 1959.